Which curtain was torn when Jesus died? Hi, I'm Ken Yates from Grace Evangelical Society, and I'd like to answer that question in the next few minutes. All of us who've attended church have heard the story, and we know from the Gospels that when Jesus died, it says the veil or the curtain in the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. And if you're like me, even in seminary classes or certainly in Bible studies, or if you hear a sermon on this, what you're going to be told almost certainly is that there was a curtain right before the Holy of Holies in the temple in Jerusalem. There was the holy place, and then there was the Holy of Holies. And the Holy of Holies was where the presence of God was localized on earth. Before it disappeared, that's where the Ark of the Covenant was located, in this room called the Holy of Holies. And right before you got to the Holy of Holies, there's this huge curtain. And in Jesus's day in the temple, it was a very thick curtain, and it was very tall. Most people think it was probably around 60 feet high. And when Jesus died, we have been told over and over again that this curtain, this massive, thick curtain, was ripped in two. And what does it represent? What it represents is that now the one who believes in Jesus, because of his death, has access to God, into the presence of God. Believers can go right into the presence of God, whereas in the Old Testament, that curtain was there. And even though there were believers in the Old Testament, they did not have access to God. The only person that could go into that room was the high priest, and that was only once a year on the Day of Atonement, when he would take in the blood of a sacrifice and place it on the Ark of the Covenant. And again, this is almost universally the way evangelicals understand that curtain being torn. And so if you ask the question, which curtain was torn when Jesus died? It was the curtain right before the Holy of Holies. Here is a typical sermon, and this is very common. If you've heard any sermon, maybe even on Easter, it's very likely something like this is what you're going to hear about this torn curtain. Let's show the video right now.
A loud tearing sound coming from inside the holy place in the Holy of Holies as God rips the curtain from the top to the bottom. Matthew tells us it was from the top to the bottom. Luke just says it was in two. Right down the middle, God ripped that curtain. There were at least 13 curtains in the temple, but one of them was the most important. That was the one that blocked the Holy of Holies. And it was there because God ordained it to be there. Because the way to God had not yet officially been opened. The high priest could go in there once a year, and that's all, and only the high priest, and only for a moment to sprinkle blood on the mercy seat and then get back out. Access to God had not been officially activated. The Holy of Holies symbolized the presence of God was closed to everyone. But on 3 o'clock, right on the nose, or around that time, light dawns and God rips open the Holy of Holies because Jesus Christ has officially activated access.
So you can see what John MacArthur has to say about it. Again, this is very common view that Jesus' death provides access for the believer into the presence of God. What I like about this video is John MacArthur says something that is very rare to hear. And that is that there were other curtains in the temple. And in the Gospels, it doesn't tell us which curtain it was. Now, I got to be honest with you. This was the first time I had heard that there were 13 curtains. Josephus, who MacArthur mentions, says that there was another curtain. Now, maybe Josephus says there were 13. I'm not sure. But there was a curtain that was at the entrance to the temple. And it's kind of amazing, isn't it, that we just assume, let's assume for a second that MacArthur's right, that there were 13 curtains, and it says that the curtain was torn. We just assume that it was the one right before the Holy of Holies. But why do we assume that? Well, because what MacArthur said is true. The death of Christ does give us access into the presence of God. The author of Hebrews says that because Jesus is our high priest, we can boldly come into the presence of God because of him, because of his death. And certainly it is understandable why evangelicals have said, that's the curtain that the gospel writers are talking about. And maybe they're right. Maybe the evangelical tradition is correct. But I don't think it is. When Josephus talks about this outer curtain, and if we think just for a second, what would it symbolize if the outer curtain, the curtain that led into the temple, not into the Holy of Holies, but into the temple itself, that if it was torn, what would it represent? And when you read the Gospels, when you see the death of Christ, the darkness that falls upon the land, and the rejection of Jesus Christ by the nation of Israel, it seems to me that we could argue that the outer curtain, if it was torn, would symbolize that judgment was about to fall upon the nation of Israel. The temple was the crown of the nation, the pride of the nation. And Jesus said just a little before he was crucified that the temple was going to be destroyed. You can look, for example, in Mark chapter 13, verse 2, with his Olivet Discourse. And I think one of the reasons that evangelicals just assume that it was the inner curtain, the one that went into the Holy of Holies, is because we think that the Gospels are just all about how does a person receive eternal life. And when I receive eternal life, I have access into the very presence of God, into the Holy of Holies. While all of that is true, most evangelicals ignore the fact, or they don't see it, that the gospel accounts are also talking about judgment is about to fall upon the nation of Israel because they have killed the king. Jesus, again, in the Olivet Discourse, talks about the fact that judgment is coming upon the nation because they rejected John the Baptist, they rejected the king, and because of that, that generation of Jews is going to be judged, and the temple is going to be destroyed. So at the death of Christ, when the nation kills their king, it seems to me we could argue pretty forcefully that when the veil of the temple was torn from top to bottom, it was the outer curtain. And again, Josephus talks about this outer curtain, which was a symbol of the fact that they just killed their king and God was going to judge the nation as a result of that. And we know that's what happened roughly 37 years later when the Romans came in and destroyed the temple and destroyed the city of Jerusalem. It's another option for us. And again, I think that it is an option that carries a lot of weight. So which curtain was torn when Jesus died? Again, if you listen to sermons, if you read commentators, they're going to talk about that inner circle. But I just want to throw out the possibility, the very real possibility, that it was the outer curtain that was torn. If you like this video, I'd ask that you'd press the like button and the subscribe button. And remember, keep grace in focus.